Memorial Airport Commission. We are meeting in a hybrid format, and we have two commissioners participating remotely, so we'll just do a roll call. Ms. Planzer, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
And Ms. Topham?
We lost her, Mr. Chair.
Oh, we lost her. Okay, would you let me know if she can reconnect, please? And then Mr. Viscarin and Mr. Marks and myself are here in person. We will take all votes by roll call because of the remote commissioner as well. And I don't have the, please remember that this meeting is being both audio, video recorded. Speak clearly for meeting minutes. And if you're online, please be mindful that anything that you share may be captured by the recording. With that, we'll move on to the agenda. Are there any questions or comments on the agenda as drafted? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted. We have the draft minutes in our packet from October 10th. Any comments or concerns with those minutes?
No.
Hearing none, we'll consider those adopted. We need to ratify the October 9th, October 23rd, and November 6th warrants. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Or a second? Any further discussion or questions on the warrants? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That'll bring us to public comment for any items which are not otherwise on the agenda. We don't have anyone here in the room. If anyone is online, would like to make a public comment, please feel free to speak up. Not seeing any. With that, we will move on to pending leases and contracts as set forth on Exhibit 1. And I'll turn those over to Manager Carver.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to report we have a number of items, many of which should come off of pending that have been there for quite some time. We have a consent to sublease between Airport Gas and Kevin Deneen of Deneen Electric. It's a 1-year renewal with an administrative fee of $1,000. We have 2 lease amendments with Nantucket Oasis Pool and Spa. I'm going to take the 2 lease amendments together for explanation purposes. The first is the inclusion of the post-survey lot dimensions that assign an additional 2,069 square feet to the leasehold. We waited to sign this until we could accommodate a fencing move that relied on airport action. The second amendment codifies a rent abatement for the tenant performing the fence relocation work and receiving a subsequent rent waiver or an abatement on the lease, and that schedule is also included in the lease. The fence itself, the utility work is scheduled to take place, I believe, later this week. Monday. Next week. And then within 3 days, the fencing should be completed pretty quickly. We have our 2 annual catering agreements with Taste of Nantucket and Island Kitchen. Those are $1,500 each. Following the 2 catering agreements, we have a task order with McFarland Johnson and a change order with Robert B. Auer. These go together, so I'm going to discuss them together. This is for the perimeter road and fence relocation on the south end of the airport property above Novadear Beach. It's $136,200 for the engineering and construction with McFarland Johnson. And then it's a change order for $268,142.16 with Robert B. Auer. And then the final item on our list is a task order for McFarland Johnson for $209,800. This is for the administrative work associated with the home connections. I've had some back and forth with McFarland Johnson about this, and I did want to take an extra moment to explain it. Billy, could you go to page 10 of the McFarland task order, please? I apologize, but I do need my talking points. Of the McFarland Johnson task order.
Yep.
14. While they're bringing that up, I'll get started. So there are a few different task and subtasking listings associated with this work. At this time, we have not incurred any construction administration costs, as what we've actually found in the way we've set this up is to treat it as a one-on-one reimbursements. So we're not actually anticipating any bidding costs, and we're anticipating low construction administration costs. And I think those two numbers are 60,000 for construction administration and 11,000 for bidding. We should assume it's another page down. There we go. You can zoom out just a little bit. There, yeah, 11,000 and 61,000. So currently at this point, we have approved a $50,000 not to exceed task order. They're at about 25% effort completed for 200 hours. If you just prorate that going forward, I really am anticipating 800 hours for a 100% level of effort, or about 138,000. I think that's a more reasonable cost, but we would need to encumber that full 209,000 figure to allow for the administrative work. I do recommend approval of all of those items, and I'm happy to discuss.
Thank you. And I had asked earlier on this issue, so I thought that contract was a bit high on administration, so I appreciate the extra investigation, and hopefully, you know, though we approve that amount, hopefully we can keep it down closer to what you're projecting, I think, for those connections.
So is this to design and extending the water main, or is this just to tie into it?
This is just to tie into it. So this is the administrative effort for meeting with homeowners, visiting the sites, developing a site and work plan. In some cases, it's documenting the work that, in some cases, homeowners have already connected. So it's working with the homeowner to receive and append all of those invoices, ensure that they're accurate.
And the number of homes on this?
I'll ask Mr. Lassen to correct me, but I believe it's about 12 homes. The connections themselves are averaging $25,000 to $30,000 a piece for the excavation, plumbing, site work.
It's actually 15 homes.
15, thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Still seems a little high to me, but
I thought so too, but I think with, if I may, with Mr. Carberg's explanation and working, that it might be down closer to 140-ish. It might be a little bit better than the at 209. I thought the same thing for an administration type of.
so it's like 10 grand for a house, right?
Right, that was kind of the
At the
math
140.
that I did for.
Still seems like a lot.
I thought so too. Mr. Lasden? Do you have anything you might expand on with that?
So it really just depends on the homeowners. Some of the homeowners have been very simple. It's been, you know, not even a site visit. It's been a couple of phone calls. There's been a couple of homeowners that we've had to make 3 trips out to the homeowner for a variety of reasons. So it really depends individually on each homeowner. We've been trying to, when we go out there, we're trying to visit more than one homeowner at a time, clearly, to make the best use of everyone's time. But each homeowner is different.
Well, I think I would ask, I think what you're hearing is that, you know, is something we're gonna be looking at, and, you know, while we absolutely appreciate the effort and the work that needs to be done. On a percentage basis compared to the cost of the connection, I think we just wanna be mindful.
Yep.
Of those costs.
So if I may,
Yeah,
so isn't this more of like a standard, like they have a well, and they have a well tank in the basement, right? There's already a connection on the line, because we already left them all one, right? When the water main got put in. So you basically have to run a water line from the house, from the street to the house, and tie it in and rip out a water tank and fill the well full of concrete, right? Isn't that what we're doing here?
Mr. Lasden?
I know maybe I'm simplifying it, but I'm just curious.
So yes, we are helping the homeowner figure out the path from the street to their house. And having them understand where their irrigation system might be, where their leaching field might be, patio and sidewalk. There's been a lot of homeowners that just didn't understand that it might be as simple as you thought it was, and they just didn't realize some of the challenges of getting from the front yard to their house. And then some homeowners are requesting, based on opinions from Weston, if they could keep their well for irrigation purposes. And then it's interior to the house. It's just some plumbing in the house. That's correct. But again, it's some homeowners are requiring more assistance in managing the process than others. Even though most of these have been the homeowner paying for the work on their own. In some cases, they're asking us to find plumbers for them, or they're asking us to find site contractors for them, or helping them sort of develop the whole process.
Thank you. Is that, and then that's in the other cost of actual installation. That's not this contract.
Yeah, I know.
This contract
That's
is
why I think
the, is
it's
the
a big number.
paperwork, right?
$10,000 a house is a big number to me.
I,
I think I'd like a piece of it. Just kidding. I'm just saying. Right?
no,
A lot of
well, I
money.
mean, it caught my eye as well for that reason, and this also, as I understand it, includes some documentation of the installed location. Not actual as-built plans, but you're creating some sort of record, sketches, drawings of some sort, so if somebody's taking some shots or some measurements, so there's some legwork being done there as well as included in this, so. Okay,
Yeah.
any other questions on any other leases or contracts? I am going to recuse
Chair, we have
Yes.
Mr. Philip Cox.
Mr. Cox.
Hi, I was just checking on the status of the track builders contract because it was on there originally, but it seems to have been removed. I just wondered if there's a comment on it.
I'll take that on, say it's not on the exhibit. We've made just recently, I believe, a notice of award, but we're not at the contract stage.
So perhaps next month, is that what you would anticipate?
Perhaps next, so, Phil, I'd say perhaps next month if it's absolutely time critical. Billy and I can discuss, and if it does involve.
Time frame was whether it was going to be this fall or the spring. We'd probably rather have it in the spring anyway. So
Okay,
just so I can go back and let them know what's on the agenda.
understood. I'd say, let's discuss offline, and, I can advise the commission if
Sure.
potentially a future special commission meeting is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I am going to recuse from the first three that were listed, for with airport gas for the subcontract, and with Oasis, to avoid any appearance of conflict due to business relationships. So let's step aside for those. And if we could first do, is there a motion to approve all of the other contracts except for those three?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Planzer and Mrs. Topham, welcome. Can you hear us?
I am. I was there a bit earlier, but then I pushed a button and lost you.
Okay, thank you.
A new computer I've got today, or iPad.
Ms. Planzer, if you could handle the vote on the first
bet.
three contracts, please.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the airport gas station, and the two Nantucket Oasis Pool and Spa?
So moved. Second.
Okay, and Mr. Marks, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin
Aye.
and and Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Okay, and the vice chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And that'll move us on to pending matters. We have an update on the South apron ramp expansion project.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start off with an update on the wall. So HMMH, who is the acoustical subcontractor, submitted a draft report to McFarland Johnson. I haven't reviewed the report yet, but Mr. Larson has summarized it for me. They modeled 6 different wall options. The recommended design is a 20-foot wall with a 3-foot 45-degree angle top and 40-foot wings at the end of the wall, all of this with absorption properties. So an absorptive material as part of the wall. The acoustical modeling was done and it was based off receiver locations for Webster Road, Monahans Road, multiple addresses on Monahans Road, Skyline Drive, Evergreen Way, and Okaraw Avenue. McFarland Johnson has also previously held meetings with wall manufacturers and one presented a solar option. So we'll need further work and communication with the engineer about solar option versus the absorptive properties if they can both work together, if they're compatible in that respect. Then we will also need McFarland Johnson to investigate how a solar connection would be set up with National Grid. There are different implications for connection. I don't know them all, but there are different approaches such as a net metering, behind the meter, sort of direct sell of power, etc.
You want to lean towards direct net metering.
Net metering.
The goal is in any of those solar systems is to utilize all the energy on your side of it. You never want any of it to go out if you can prevent it. It's the best benefit to you.
So, and then general project updates associated with the work. National Grid has approved the work. They moved to schedule it very quickly. All of the cable has been pulled by Kobo. That work is complete. Staff have been on site with, I believe it was with Kobo, adjusting the angle of the lights. I'm looking for more information. I'm actually excited to go out at night and have them turn the lights on and off if they can. Commissioning of the cameras and the noise monitors will be scheduled and take place now that power has been pulled. FAA and Mass DOT aeronautics staff will also be on site Thursday for a project walkthrough and inspection of the south ramp. This is typically done at the close of any majorly federally funded project. Any questions before I move on to PFAS and then recorders?
Do you anticipate that the cameras and lights are gonna be operational by the time of the walkthrough?
No.
Oh, okay.
And we did decide to schedule the walkthrough while we still had nice weather. We determined, 39 of the $40 million are spent on pavement and drainage.
Okay, I just was wondering.
We didn't expect that. For a PFAS update,
Oh, did you have-
Regarding the noise
Yeah,
wall, we have any chance of getting that installed before we start next summer's busy season?
no.
Okay. Oof, okay.
No, I'm sorry to be so
Yeah.
blunt.
Well, an answer is
Yeah.
an answer, yeah.
Right.
Mr. Lassen can maybe advise on his tentative project schedule.
That would be great. What are you thinking, Mr. Lasden? Rough,
So I guess it depends on, has the commission decided to move forward with a solar wall? That's sort of the first question. And then, go ahead.
when will we be presented with that as a, decision tree point?
So we are now going to be reaching out to National Grid and having those conversations as the commission just talked about, the type of net metering and other options. So we're engaging in those conversations now with National Grid to understand the implications of what they need and what that means as far as hookups and time frame and other stuff. The next step in the process is soil borings. They are scheduled to start the end of this month. And then after that, we can get into some design and put this out to bid. But I think the last piece is the commission's sort of decision on the final wall option.
Will you be doing some kind of more formal presentation for us to make that decision?
Absolutely, yeah.
So perhaps would you think you would be ready for that for the December meeting?
Depending on how quickly we can meet with National Grid, yes, I don't see why not.
Okay, so like whatever else is maybe, because I think perhaps even from what I just heard based on the noise modeling, there's sort of, a decision to be made based upon the performance, and then you're gonna have the other aspect of, whatever National Grid says. I mean, it seems to me that you could figure out one way or another, you're gonna get the power out of it. It's most likely gonna be, as they say, behind the meter and net metering. I don't think the airport's gonna have any problem using the amount of electricity that's produced. It's probably more of a logistical matter of how the distribution, I mean, I'm just guessing here a little bit, how you get from that spot to where all of the needs are on the airport, because I'm sure there's so many different feeds or other meters, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and there is a difference in cost between a regular wall and a solar wall. So we would have to sort of, go over that with you also.
Right, like you must have to have some kind of fastening system, I would think, and, kind of maybe on a cost benefit basis, I think we'd have to have some kind of understanding on
Correct.
that. What's your payback period, and
Correct.
is it really worth it? You seem to have a,
Solar reflectors on a sound barrier seems to be, are we gonna get any problems with glare from pilots? In other words, landing on approach with the solar wall sitting there?
They'll do a glare study.
So there is a glare study that's required. Maybe part of the benefit here is that the tower can't really see it, and it's parallel with the runway, so the pilots really wouldn't see it until they're turning into the apron. But yes, there is a solar glare study that's required. The technology's gotten much, much better over the years. In the past, it used to be a much bigger problem, but many airports now have solar panels all over their airfields, and the FAA is recognized that, and the technology's gotten much better.
I'm still a little concerned about getting this wall in place for the next summer. I mean, I can just hear,
Yep.
you've had a whole year since the May town meeting, and suddenly a year later, we don't have anything. That's not
right, we're kind
a
of
good
getting
look.
bogged down, it sounds like, on trying to add something perhaps beneficial. So I think we're gonna have to try to advance that as soon as we can, if there's some decision that needs to be made. And if I'm glad to hear that the soil borings and the essentially other investigations for design elements are proceeding, that would be needed either way.
Yep.
But yeah, hopefully we could be ready to sort of know what else, that we're not held up yet another month after that. Because if there's any point that information, I guess is what I'm saying, is needed for you to be able to continue forward, please, let us know through the manager, and we'll, try to work to whatever we have to do to get you, if it's a special meeting or what have you, for a topic such as this, to keep it moving.
Okay,
Thank you.
will do.
Yeah, please.
So the solar panels, right, is the intent to attach them to the face to be a vertical panel
Correct,
versus a horizontal panel?
correct.
And what is the net income of energy production onto that versus the standard arrangement to the south? Because I know, like in my facility, it's like a 10% capacity factor. Is it gonna be like 2 or 3 because it's vertical and it's gonna face to the east? So I'm just trying to see if there's really any benefit to doing that and wasting the time to go down that road.
Yeah.
We haven't had all of those discussions. We just started having this discussion recently when we came back when the manufacturer indicated that they could do that. So we will do some more investigation.
Right. It just might not be worth it based on the production.
Based on how it's mounted.
Right, exactly, based on the exposure
Yeah.
It's pretty minimal, from what I understand,
vertically.
vertically.
I would think so too. And then you mentioned a 3-foot angled top, and so tell me if I'm wrong, but I would presume that would be 45-degree angled in towards the field.
Correct.
Which is therefore gonna shade
It's going to, yes,
the panels. And
yes,
as the sun, and the more we think about this, and as the sun, moves from the east to the west, come the middle of the day, you're gonna, the whole second half of the
Nothing.
day, you're not gonna get anything.
Right.
So I'm not so sure about the solar, but I
Okay.
don't wanna absolutely defeat it.
I'm
but-
really pro solar myself, but
Yeah,
I agree,
absolutely. I
there's
put it
certain, there's a
in-
time.
And that's why that's honestly why we investigated it and brought it up.
Yeah,
Yep.
let's, if it's just not gonna really produce, then.
Okay, we will get some more information and pass it on to the manager.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the South Apron?
I have nothing further on the subject.
Thanks. Anyone else? Any questions? Thanks. So we're moving on to the PFAS investigation update,
Okay,
please.
so my apologies, Cameron had something that came up at the last moment. So you'll hear a lot of talking from me because I'll present the PFAS items. I'm going to skip the table for now and move directly into just the figure. I'm going to talk through the figure that was attached, or that was included in the packet. So recently, beginning in late September, we took on a second round of sampling, and what I've asked our LSP consultant to do with this figure, since I don't have them today, is to try to draw the line between giving us something we can present without being present to answer all of the technical questions. But you'll see 4 homes in red circles, and those are homes based off of the results of our sampling that we've moved forward to connect to town water. We reached out to take 19 samples. Our consultant heard back, at least when I talked to them this week, from 14 or 15 of those residences. 4 of those tested above the lower EPA maximum contaminant limits. So we are connecting all of those homes. The other 9 were either non-detect or very low, below even the EPA maximum contaminant limits. So as I said, we are currently in the process. We reached out to all of these residents. We're connecting them, or if they're already connected, we will reimburse them for the cost of their connections. And then the residences indicated by the blue circles, those are the homes that the consultant would like to do the next round of step out sampling. I'm not going to count them up really quickly, but it looks like 7 or 8 homes based on the consultant's recommendation. They are not shown on this map because I asked the consultant to keep it clean, but I've recently executed 2 connection agreements for residents that we decided to connect more recently based off of our concern over the EPA maximum contaminant limits. And as McFarland Johnson goes through their work with these residents, we'll work to execute those agreements. The green line that you see on the figure is our disposal site boundary, and I'll talk more about the disposal site boundary in context of some items in the packet. But that's the item, that's the line of our study where we think the airport, there's evidence of some level of airport contamination, and the airport should take responsibility for those homes. The 2 red step outs are based off of our most recent results, where we have gotten samples and we've connected additional homes. You can see 2 bump outs. And that's based off of the data that we got, clearly with more sampling and attention to the more stringent future facing EPA MCL limits. We see, or the licensed site professional sees, an airport signature that makes up at least part of those sites. So we've taken those on. And then any further work will be informed by any future sampling. I'll take a break there before I move into the disposal site boundaries. Are there any questions on this figure?
Questions?
I have a question that's not really about the figure, but when you draw the figure up there, it made me think of it. Is the PFAS relative to the foam that we discharge, right? And the PFAS relative to like the washes, the waxes and things like that that may have come from the car wash, right? Are they distinguishable in the tests that we're doing?
My understanding is no, there's a
Okay.
general quote, airport signature that's a blend of, you know, multiple items, but predominantly aqueous film forming foam.
However, and if I may expand on that, there is, as shown on there, the squares more closely match the source that was found on the opposite side of Old South Road. So who knows what is going on over there? And if you look at all these other samples that just came in on this figure that have the square, those don't match the ARF,
Our signature,
right?
but the ones on the other side do. The ones that are, you have the red circles around there, that does match our.
Yes,
Okay.
those, because those have a red circle in the middle,
Interesting.
yeah.
So they
right.
match our,
Yeah.
yeah. our signature.
Somehow,
I'm just curious.
And if I may specifically, there's nuance, again, I don't wanna take the role of the LSP, but there's nuance in those red circles. The one on Belvedere Way is predominantly pine tree signature, but the LSP thought there's enough of an airport signature that the airport should take ownership of that home. Home Sierra Lima, predominantly airport signature. And then, sorry, I can't make it out, but I believe it's maybe one on Webster. It was a mix of signatures, but enough for the airport to take ownership. And the future results will probably, you know, help draw further conclusions about that sort of signature.
and I had a question, the properties that are shown with the target symbol labeled as sampled, we're waiting for the results to come back on those? Is that,
I believe that is correct. There
Oh.
are 4 or 5 outstanding homes, which just seasonality of residents.
okay,
not necessarily
it says,
reaching on what-
it says sampled. So I'm presuming that, but they don't have any indication as to what those results were. The black, if it helps,
Yeah.
I have the same, that these ones.
I believe that those are all homes that are now connected to town water.
Well, I think that they would all have that other symbol then, the blue triangle, the cyan triangle, so. It's fine, you can get back, you know, I just was curious, what the status was, or if they're simply awaiting further results to come back from the sampling that had been done.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to, it's fine, it's something that you could get back to us maybe on. Does anybody else have any questions on this? So what's our next steps here? Wait for a further report from the LSP?
So I believe we're going to move forward, you know, begin the outreach, contact these residents, sample these homes and take the data. You know, as it stands, staff feel empowered to make directions as far as anything that could come out of that, whether it's to initiate home connections. And then we will be due in another month or two to have the LSP return and,
Okay.
and give a data backed presentation.
Okay,
And when's the, excuse me, the final, next report? Do we have a date on that when that comes, like our next step with the remediation and things like that? You know?
Specifically, I don't, but I feel like the next IRA report, they're still doing 6-month increments, which will be in another 2 months.
Okay, so yes.
so it sounds like perhaps just after the new year, instead of maybe just before the holiday, maybe we plan on an update if they're ready for our January meeting, tentative.
Mhm.
See, just if you're gonna talk to them, and that seems with an update at next meeting for maybe any connections that you did or anything like that, sort of like this.
Okay.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, moving on.
And then the remaining item in your packet, we have three letters, as you noted. We had initially established the green disposal site boundary. Administratively, this requires notifications to the residents who now find themselves in that boundary, as well as the select board and the board of health. You know, my concern was that without context and without review, if I'm a resident and I just see a sort of boilerplate template letter about now being within the disposal site boundary, I'm going to be concerned. I'd equally be concerned if I had this without context. And I was the new health department director. So what I've done, I reached out to, you know, my peers at the town, let them know that we're going to be discussing this. This is what the form of agreements would take. Put them up in front of the commission for your review. We've tried to edit the letters with our LSP and with our stakeholder groups, so when they do go out to residents, you know, they not only have we sort of vetted this text, but we've also had some time to already reach out to them if they are being connected to water. We've made those outreach efforts. So I'd say we're happy to take feedback before we edit these and go out. But we also wanted them here for commissions and for town staff's visibility.
Is there any people there that you think are unaware of what's going on? And what's the magnitude of that list? Is it 10 people or is it 100 people? Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, so I'm always surprised, but at this point, when I look at these homes, I associate a resident name and, you know, number of times I've spoken with them on different topics.
Right.
And I think it's, you know, it's on the order of 10 to 15 people,
So
residents within the disposal site.
and probably people that are aware of what's going on, if nothing else, right?
That's my hope, but
Yeah.
also I think it's always, I think, different being the recipient of a letter rather than the issuer.
No, I agree with you, because the last thing you want is somebody to, like, you know, go post it out and turn it into something that it may not be, right? So I agree with what you're saying, right? You're concerned.
The language disposal site boundary.
It's kind of,
Sounds to me like they're ready to dump more
I
PFAS
agree.
inside the line. I think we need a more euphonious label for that, such as airport dispersal.
I think it's a regulatory term.
Oof, it just sounds, it sounds like they're about ready to come out and dump some PFAS right in your front
No,
lawn. That's what it
or,
sounds like.
well, I'll be honest, I don't disagree with his interpretation of that too, because it sounds like, oh, this is the limit of where we can dispose of
We're gonna
things.
start
That's what it
dumping some
sounds
stuff,
like,
yeah.
right? I
Stand
agree.
by for the dump truck. Yeah, that's what that sounds like to me. When I read that letter, I'm going,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah, I see.
this
that
is
interpretation.
disastrous.
I'll review that again with our stakeholder.
Or maybe like an explanation of what the term means, right? So that it's not. If it is the
Yeah.
term, but there's an explanation of the term right up front, so that it eliminates the questioning of it.
Yeah, the language just sounds terrible.
And like you say, it may be a requirement to use that term.
I would ignore that. We're gonna scare these people.
Well-
We have already scared the heck out of these poor
Well,
people,
that's
and now we're
the
about ready
concern.
to do it again.
For what it's worth, and that was why when I first read it,
I'm going,
I had a
"Whoa."
very similar reaction and had given some feedback that I think that was why for any of the ones that we knew we were absolutely going to be connecting, we incorporated that to say that it's not subject to further study, right? So some people that's why we've staff's initiated those connections right ahead. So if we know, so that it's not like, oh, we're continuing to look into it. But some of them do, as I understand it, need further investigation.
This also, we're labeling ourselves subject to an intentional infliction of emotional distress tort claim when you send somebody a letter like this.
B.
Yeah, you send me the letter. I'm not too sharp. I don't really read the body of the letter. I see this just, I'm within the disposal line. I'm going, oh, I'm gonna sue over this thing.
Well, and I agree because
I think this is dangerous to send this letter out. I really do.
I think the disposal zone is the problem, right? Because it
Yeah.
implies that it was intentional. It implies that you intend to, right? In my opinion, from when I read
Yeah.
that, as opposed to a clear,
We
way
need
to
a,
say
we need a
that.
different term here. We really do. This is tortious activity.
Is there a regulatory timeline by which this letter needs to be issued that you're aware of?
I asked that question and I believe it's flexible within this stage of the MCP program, which lasts a year.
Yeah.
And we gotta balance that. We gotta be careful that it's not seen as withholding information. And we're discussing this in a
I would
public
send out a letter.
hearing.
I would send out a letter. I just think the term we're using is subjecting ourselves to a claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I'm sitting there, I don't know too much about this. I get this letter with the, in dispersal line.
Yeah,
I'm
people are
going,
sensitive to it
holy
anyway."
jumping Jupiter.
Is
you
it
know.
something that maybe you might be willing to work with Noah on some revised language and?
What is the purpose for this letter?
It's an administrative requirement under the 21E law that the state obligates a regulated party like the airport to follow. So it's a pretty,
And-
my understanding, it's a fairly standard form letter, but the law dictates sort of what the law dictates to, and I don't know our degree of flexibility.
In other words, we might be able to picking up a government contractor defense on this, but we don't want to be sued in the first place. I would think we need to find a more euphonious term, which we could determine right now. This doesn't take a lot of imagination here. What other term could we use? Maybe we could use our best term and then put it in the asterisk down there. Government requires us to use this term, but we're using another term in the head of the letter. It sounded bad to me.
It's beyond my capacity to advise because I don't know what would be statutorily required because we have to make a notification
Yeah.
to the page and line.
Why don't
and
we
stuff.
call up one of our,
Yeah, let's.
Mina, I think we're gonna cause ourselves a problem with this. Before I send that letter out, I would just have a discussion.
Of course.
You can discuss that with our counsel, get his view on that.
Yeah, it's that was, I think, all of our initial reaction, and I think that it's already, as I understand it, been adjusted to take that into account. But let's see what we can do to really make sure that it's clear and, it does end with a, invitation to contact the manager for any questions, which I think that's sort of, what we're hoping is that if someone gets this.
Yeah, in my view, that doesn't cure the tort. I would just talk I would just talk to Mina about that or talk to somebody about that.
Okay.
Mackie.
I think the problem is that the term isn't clearly understood.
It's
By,
frightening.
even by us,
It's
and
frightening.
we're part of it, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even by us, and we understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
I think it's more like, hey, your property falls into the, has fallen into the boundaries of the extent of the pollution relative to the, discharge of the PFAS at the airport, to the.
I would
foam
leave the
on
word pollution out of it.
Well, I did.
The extent of the discharge or.
Extent of the
this is-
discharge.
This is the envelope of the possible level of PFAS.
That is what the letter said.
It is,
The
I know.
area where the hazardous materials are identified in quantities above the specified regulatory thresholds is then defined as the disposal
Yeah.
site.
You can make
The
a phone
site.
call, we
I
don't need to
think the
belabor it here.
disposal
I-
word is the
yeah.
part that gets me.
The disposal is a scary term. That sounds like we're
Discharge. It was a
disposing this.
It was a discharge, right?
Yeah, I would use discharge would be better.
If you could.
you know, and should check on that, I guess.
Right, because the discharge indicates that it happened, and then now we're
I would use
continuing to do it.
potential
where
discharge.
Disposal sounds like we're gonna continue.
Yeah, the disposal is terrible, terrible.
I don't know, maybe
Dispersal,
it's semantics,
dispersal
but-
sounds better to me. But I would,
You know, wordsmith that maybe a little with council and
I
see what
will,
we
I
can
will
do.
reach out
Yeah.
back to our stakeholders.
I'm just trying to
and we'll-
keep you from getting another black eye
Yeah.
from somebody. I don't
Yeah.
want you to get beat up anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
On to the crew quarters
Okay.
project.
So what I have set up for the commission, to switch gears for a little bit, is I've assembled our project team. Plus a couple extra subject matter experts. I'm hoping that we can present the program definition document, financial feasibility material. And the project team, just have them all available for you to or answer your questions, so you have material that you might need.
I think we still had to do crew quarters and the dorm. You were jumping on to terminal
I
optimization.
sure did.
So crew
you were
quarters,
so excited about.
I know.
I just wanted to turn the page. on.
yeah, no, crew quarters,
My apologies.
maybe just a quick update on the schedule, I think is
Okay.
where we're at with that.
So we are 1 week and a day through the sewer connection. We have been closing Over Deer Farm Road at night to accommodate the sewer extension to our work site. I've included a schedule, two schedules in your packet. Show the detailed milestones for completion. We've lost a few weeks as we work through a submittal issue. We are back on pace. The material is all there, and we're showing closeout and acceptance by July 29th for that project. So it's a quick summary of this. Be happy to answer any questions on schedule, milestones.
Questions?
How much, when do we think we were gonna try to get this whole project done by June? There's been some slippage, I understand.
Right.
July 29th.
July 29th.
That's the date on the schedule, and I asked it too.
That's gonna be a tough day.
I'm using August 1st in my
Boom,
mind,
yeah.
so we'll
Okay.
see,
Okay.
hopefully.
Okay. The next item, I'm asking for a vote of the commission to change the address for the parcel from 10 Sun Island to 10 Belvedere Farm Road. As part of the design for the townhouse, we reviewed with public safety agencies, and we think it makes the most sense for emergency responders to intuitively respond to 10 Belvedere Farm Road versus Sun Island. At the townhouse stage, that invokes subdivision law, which I can't really speak to. And there would be additional numbering work that we would do to address townhouse or other parcels. But for the immediate concern for the dorm, as the entity having care, custody, control for the property on the deed, it starts with your adoption for the address change.
Makes sense. Any questions? Is there a motion to request? I believe we still have to go through the assessor
Correct.
for that. So is there a support to change the address from 10 Sun Island to 10 Belvedere Farm Road?
So moved.
Second,
Ms. Topham, how do you vote? Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Viscarin?
aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. On to terminal optimization, please.
All right, Bill, do you mind bringing up slide 1 for my presentation? Okay, well, I already gave you a little preview.
Yeah,
A lot
you
of people here to
Yeah.
answer your questions, help you with the decision. So I'm gonna move right to introductions. If I could ask Rich, if you could introduce, if you have your MEP on your team, let me know. And then, CHA, I see Ted, I don't know if John is here as well. If you could
So
introduce-
yes, I do have Jonathan McCready from Fenwick McCready and Priyanka Menon from Fenwick McCready, and also Petros from our office, who is our senior mechanical engineer that can talk about geothermal systems.
And CHA?
No, we have, yes, John Delbossel's on the line here. And John, you want to introduce Mitch?
Yep, good afternoon, everybody. It's John Delbalso. the OPM PM with CHA, and I am joined by Mitch DeWine. I'll let Mitch kind of introduce himself.
Thanks, Sean. Mitch DeWine, I'm the business practice leader for CHA's generation and energy management business practice. A good portion of what I do on a daily basis evolves around all things energy efficiency, energy management, building side systems, and one of those primary things being geothermal systems. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Okay, thank you. So for my commissioners, I'm going to give a brief one-slide overview. Going to turn it over to Mr. Laston. He's going to take 5 or 10 minutes and go through the program definition document. I have the geothermal experts here because there is, I believe, a specific conversation we all want to have about what direction to take the future terminal geothermal system, regardless of conversation on terminal renovation. We do need to address the geothermal system, and I think their expertise is important. I have a little bit of time devoted for the architect, and then I have a financial feasibility slide and a manager recommendation, but noting that this is the commission's project to direct. We're here to answer your questions and take your direction. Okay. So, my introduction and high level review, just currently we have total terminal borrowing authorization, 17 million through 2 previous town meeting borrowing articles. I'm sorry I don't have these filled in, but the amount currently encumbered is roughly 1.5 million, which leaves about $16.5 million available. The encumbrances are for the owner's project manager's contract and the program definition document contract. We currently have underway. Just as a reminder, we've been at this for a little bit. We do have a deliberate project strategy here. We're here tonight to, in main part, discuss accepting the program definition documents. We did this because it's a 10 to 15% design effort that we can receive, and it'll develop an informed preliminary cost estimate. And we did not have to take on a full, long, comprehensive, and more expensive design process to get to that decision point. So we believe it's efficient, saving money, due diligence. Do you mind going back? Then we can use this preliminary cost estimate to inform our financial feasibility steps. It's in the packet. I'm sure you've gone through it and you've seen the estimate. And then, of course, we have our feelings, but we are not here to tell you what to do. We're here to present the information, answer your questions, and you'll direct us to a next step. So with that, Mr. Laston, I'd like to turn it over to you to discuss the program definition documents and the geothermal system.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So, Noah, you've given the program definition document to all your commissioners?
Correct, it's in the packet.
Okay, so I guess to start with, for most of the commissioners, this project was started about 3 years ago, I guess. There was a design charrette. The airport had expressed some desire to do something with the terminal. What that was, they weren't sure, but we had a design charrette where the airport commission and the airport management team shared some challenges with the terminal, some deficiencies, and some thoughts on where they wanted the terminal to go. And out of that design charrette came a couple of big picture items, passenger experience, passenger processing, baggage movement, a desire to do something better with hold room capacity other than the use of the tent, some general discussions and thoughts about reconfiguration of the terminal. The terminal, for most here, I think, realized that when the terminal was built, the airport was mainly a air taxi operation. It was Cape Air, Island Air, and Nantucket Air, moving sort of 100 or more thousand people through 9 passenger planes with much limited commercial service through conventional size aircraft. Since that time, the airport has sort of changed its model, and it is mostly now conventional aircraft, screen passengers, longer stage lengths to various cities across the country. And the terminal wasn't designed for that operation. So one of the things was how do we repurpose some of the space and make the airport more efficient towards what they serve now? So when we started putting together this program definition document, we sat down with the airport manager and really sort of challenged all of us to say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? And what we were trying to accomplish is really sort of figure out the path forward. And part of figuring out the path forward was really sort of looking at what the airport has and how can that either be repurposed or what expansion and modifications need to be done. So this project included a variety of things. The first thing was doing a laser scanning of the whole terminal, doing a survey, doing a hazmat study, doing a complete investigation of sort of everything that we have today in the terminal to see what the condition is, what can be reused, and then to sort of move forward in a direction. So based on that and some sit downs with the airport management and some commissioners, the team came up with three alternatives on designs, sort of a smaller expansion, I'll call it, to meet most of the targets, and then two larger expansions that met almost all the requirements necessary. There was some meetings with the airport commission and the manager, and what was called the North Build option was the option that was selected as the preferred alternative. And what that did was it expanded out into the courtyard in front of the arrivals courtyard between the arrivals door and the tower. It expanded out that way, and it expanded out into the aircraft area where the lighting vault is and where Cape Air parks in those spots up north. And then there was also some concerns about how does the parking lot, curb frontage, passenger movement on the street side function. So we came up with some alternatives on how to improve the land side access into the terminal. There was three or four alternatives developed, and they were presented to a couple of commissions and the airport manager, and there's a preferred alternative that sort of identified what that looked like. And then as far as the repurposing of the building, in addition to some added space, part of the challenge was how do we reuse the building space that we have? We got some feedback from the TSA that passenger screening was a challenge, that bag screening was a challenge. Certainly, passenger flow in front of the ticket counters was a challenge. So the repurposing of that space was also looked at. The back office space, which is behind the counter, we looked at that on how can we repurpose some of that space. Some of those functions ended up down in the basement. We found some space in the basement that was underutilized and could be used for back office space. And that did a couple things. One, it used some space that was underutilized, and two, it reduced the expansion footprint that would be possibly required in order to meet all the requirements. In developing the options, there is a document called the Airport Cooperative Research Program, which is a process through the U.S. Department of Transportation that sort of publishes guidelines on right sizing of terminals. And we used that document along with the master plan that we were working on at the time to figure out what size the terminal sort of needed to be and what size the terminal wants to be. And so that was with those documents is how we came up with the sizing of the terminal and the sizing of the individual components of space. And then we also looked at all the facilities. Noah did mention that geothermal is certainly a concern of yours. We looked at the electrical system, we looked at the plumbing system, we looked at bathroom fixtures, we looked at a whole series of the building systems to see what you have and what you need to have, and made some recommendations on moving forward. And then along with that, everybody sort of is may be concerned, and rightfully so, about the cost of the project. And as part of this project, we did have a professional engineering firm develop a cost for this project, which was included in the report. I guess it's a very high level, sort of fast review of the document, and I can continue with some more discussions. We can open it up for some conversations. Mr. Chair, how would you like to sort of continue on?
Thanks. Why don't we stop there, the overview? Are
Yep.
there any initial questions from anybody about the project?
I think funding,
Sure, we're gonna have to get definitely to sort of,
I think funding kind of drives where we can go, right?
right. Since you do have these experts that are here.
Yep.
On the geothermal, which was a bit of a focus.
Yep.
Perhaps we should have a little more discussion there. One of the things that I noticed in the plan, so, you know, I'll just start to say this and then you guys could jump in, is sort of that there was a layout in our packet on the plans for changing to a closed loop geothermal system with a very lot of wells underneath the entire, you know, sort of front parking area, if you will. And I would like to know more information about sort of the efficiencies and cost and operation of that versus just changing to a conventional air handler system, and what your thoughts on that might be.
Petros, do you have some time to talk about that?
I do have time. Generally speaking, the closed loop geothermal system will be more cost effective than your traditional air handler. You essentially have free energy from the ground. Where you pay a little bit more is the pumping from the geothermal field to your building. You're going to have slightly larger pumps, but those pumps are not big enough to offset the cost of your fuel consumption with a traditional system.
And then with respect to your initial capital cost for the installation of that infrastructure versus the air handlers, I understand they're not fully designed, so just a general discussion.
Yeah, the cost will depend on the number of wells and a more detailed load calculation. We see up here in the Northeast, I'm located in upstate New York. We see typically between $18,000 a well, drilled and piped and grouted. So, Rich, I don't remember what our cost estimate included for that. Do we have that available to share that information?
I don't remember offhand if we have that actual number offhand.
Yeah, we don't have to get too much into
yeah.
the weeds
Yeah.
specific. I think we're just looking, sort of wondering. I think there's a couple of decision points here, which is
Yeah.
going to be, if we go with the full build of the new
Yep.
terminal,
Yep.
how that is handled, and then if we start to contemplate a modification interim, and given the open loop system we have now, if we were to look to replace that, would it be conventional air handler versus this open loop system?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes, please.
So we did also look at treating the open loop system. If you wanted to keep the open loop system with a GAC system similar to what you have currently at the fuel farm, it would be a municipal water supply sized filter system that would be able to handle the volume. But there would be a maintenance cost of changing the GAC out on a regular basis. As the GAC did its job and filtered out the PFAS, you'd have to change the GAC system out at a regular basis. But there is treatment systems that could handle this volume of water if you chose to keep the open loop systems as another option.
Asking, go ahead.
So we can put in a GAC system, right?
Correct.
So we have a couple of problems here, right? We don't just have one problem. We're not just trying to heat the building. We have to think about remediation for PFAS down the road too,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So maybe we can kill two birds with one stone by putting in the GAC system. I'm not saying that's the solution, but I'm curious to know what the GAC system costs versus putting in 180 wells at that, I think the average price was $2,000 a well on Nantucket. It was
25.
inflated to up to 25, up to 3,000 was the
Yeah.
number I think I
Yep.
read today. So I'm just curious, if you add those costs together for putting in, let's argue the 180 wells at $25,000 a piece versus the GAC system, that's gonna, I don't know what that costs, right? That's kind of what we need to help us make this decision. I
Yes,
think we understand the benefits of geothermal, and to
Yep.
go to a conventional system would be extremely expensive to operate over the lifetime of a system.
correct.
And those life cycle expenses will be helpful also to justify going away from a GAC, and if we choose not to do that for the reclamation part of the project, meaning that the closed loop system would be more appropriate. So I think having some figures in this life cycle costs will be helpful to understand this.
And we do have some preliminary costs for both of those systems, and we can certainly put together a memo and send it to the airport manager so you can see that. Absolutely.
Thanks.
And then to expand on that, since we're working on this and through
Yep.
this, would the open loop system treated with the GAC filter have the capacity for the expanded terminal project?
Yes, I anticipate that with the expansion, you will probably run 2 out of the 3 wells that you currently have. So you have more than enough capacity. Whoever put the system in seems like they've made allowance for future expansion.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
I agree completely. Let's learn a little bit more about what that might look like. And that might be something that we're going to have to consider regardless of the terminal overall project. I think that there is a bit of a decision point here with, I really appreciate the projections and finances slides that had been prepared and put into this that showed our potential debt service. There's also a fair amount of assumptions to be made as to where the funding sources would come and how those different buckets might get filled, if you will, whether, what grant, speculation in terms of, what grant might come from the federal program versus retained earnings versus essentially adjusted new revenue, I guess is probably the term I would look at there. And there's a lot to be considered there. I think I'm one that tends to assume a worst case scenario that would be that we really just don't luck out, if you will, on grant funding, that our retained earnings are essentially tied up with other projects that are in the queue and commitments. And so what would this look like if we had to, fund the project primarily through a long-term borrowing authorization and carrying that, annual debt payment, which I think that there was a very much of a hybrid assumption that was put in, but I do wonder what a worst case, scenario might look like there, if we had to pay for it. The flip side of that coin, as we think about this, is the Vineyard just got $15 million for their terminal out of this same program. And, where is the balance point that the commission might feel that if we were to get, say, X percentage of the overall project cost, then it really would make sense to do it. Rough numbers in my mind, if you were lucky enough, I guess I would say, to be in that 50% somewhere along there of that kind of a project cost, then maybe it is, really a win to balance out to get the rest of it. So those are just some thoughts I have. I don't know that we're going to decide this tonight, but I do think we need to have a discussion between all of us collectively, as well as to be able to get any questions answered and decide whether the project proceeds to the next phase. And maybe you guys could tell us a little bit more about what that would mean, either Rich or someone else. If we were to say, you know, let's keep going with this, what would your next steps be?
So currently, the contract that we have completed at the completion of the PDD. So
Okay.
there is not a next step at this point. So the
Yep.
next step would be to develop a scope and fee for the design of the terminal to move forward. Now, interestingly enough, in the past, we sort of were told that, projects had to be shovel ready to sort of win. And Martha's Vineyard wasn't shovel ready. They were sort of in the same place that you are now. They had just essentially finished their PDD and won. So Jonathan, who's on the picture here now, is scrambling to design something because they need a grant on bid by May 1st. So they were just awarded that money last month, and they did not have a signed signed design contract when they won. So now, none of us can predict the new political administration, and will there be another round? Nobody can predict that, right? There was another round in the current program. There was one more round, but with the political situation moving forward, there is no magic crystal ball out there that says there'll be another round or not.
That's really good information. I appreciate that. That's sort of heads off what my question was in terms of the next step. Where would we need to get to be, positioned to apply for those grants? And it almost sounds like, while it might not be the most advantageous position, as if you had a full design that you could, completely everybody's behind and support, we could apply potentially for, if there was a new program release based upon the work that we've completed with the current document. So I think that's a decision that and we're sort of waiting to see, if I understand, whether or not there's a new announcement, and then for funding opportunities, and then there's usually a fairly quick deadline to then meet that. Maybe that's something we think about, right? Because if we were successful, it might change the commission's thinking in terms of, depending on how much we were awarded, how to then fund the project and whether it moves forward. At the same time, I think that's one fork in the road, and we might have done a lot of good work, the team here, and thank you for that, so that we could do that. I think we also have, as is outlined in this, there are some more immediate deficiencies of the terminal that would need to be addressed if we didn't move forward with this. So I think
we have been sharing this whole process with the FAA, which I think will benefit us, because even though they have not participated to date in funding the PDD, both the feds and the state have been well aware of all of our topics and discussions about this project, and we have shared this report with them. So hopefully that puts you in a better position when New England has to make some decisions on moving forward.
I mean, I as one commissioner, I have a lot of concern with that worst case scenario, if we were to keep going and having to essentially, self-fund and borrow this entire amount and pay for it on an annual basis.
Yeah. My view is we've got $10 million in retained earnings. We're looking at a $5 million noise wall. We're looking at a $8 million crew quarters plus the second phase there. That leaves us borrowing, if we get no money from the feds, $40 million to even think about doing this. By the time you get it funded and get it up and started, I'm sure there are going to be cost overruns, delays, etc. I'm a no vote going forward with any improvement on the terminal at this point. Certainly, we might want to look at our heating system, what kind of a loop system we want to have. with regard to geothermal, I'd certainly consider that, but I don't think we're in a position and I think the political situation is dire. I think the new administration is going to be cutting funding on every program they can possibly find. And I wouldn't sit around waiting for a whole lot of money coming out of the next administration for this. I really wouldn't. So my view is, let's do what we have to do, which is crew quarters. We're already into that with a delay, which means more money. We've got to build this noise wall, and I'm a little discouraged that that's not going to get done before June 1st, that we're going to get some blowback on that. I would rather concentrate on getting the wall done, getting our crew quarters done. This is a nice to have kind of thing in the future, but we don't need it next year. That's my view.
I share that view to some extent. I think that I would add on that it's not just the crew quarters, but in my mind, we are in the middle of a capital process for the townhouses to follow. And then, I think part of the discussion, the way I've put it is I'm kind of thinking about it as the airport's housing production plan, put it in the term, and then we still have the Thompson House, Manager House piece of that once we get the seasonal. So I think that there is a good amount on our plate, if you will. And then there's also the main runway rehabilitation as a very, very significant project that just to add on to sort of some of the things. We have our capital improvement plan also laid out with a bunch of other items too. Right. So I like the idea, and my gut feeling is similar to yours. This was just a big change of things that we don't know how it's going to shake out here. So it would be difficult to make a full commitment right now for me to move forward to a next step that was a scoping and contract for especially just having heard that we might be able to, should there be an opportunity of grant award, be able to at least apply, see how that goes. I mean, you've got your, kind of what you would do. We've laid out that work. But I think that it will hear how everybody feels on this. This isn't just, but then there is the piece of things to discuss that was hit on there on the GAC and the open loop, closed loop. We're going to have to figure something out, I think, on what we do for the existing open loop geothermal system. And then there is what are the other immediate deficiencies, one of which I believe is the tent that we'll have to address in some manner. I liked how Mr. Carberg put it in the report and I told him this, tent 3.0. It's almost what might that next iteration of, and the challenge there, of course, is you spend some money as an interim solution, but then if you had done the whole project, you wouldn't have spent that. But it might be our all things considered option. And how, what do we do and what does that look like is something that I'm wondering about. So Marks?
I agree wholeheartedly with you, and I feel that part of the other thing you mentioned, which was really good, is the PFAS thing. We haven't even remediation. We don't even know what we have to do there
For both this and then finishing the things we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
Other
that's
water
what I mean.
connections and.
Yeah. Feel like we're kind of stretched a little thin there.
Right. That's
Without funding, I feel like this would be a non-starter. We couldn't get funding, in my opinion.
I would ask, back to you, Mr. Lasden or Mr. McCready. I know that when we started this, there was an alternative that was considered, I think, in terms of what might be, and it sort of snowballed pretty quickly into geez, it's really hard to just address the little things, and it might not be so efficient, but is there the ability or potential interim type of plan that you could bring forward to us, or how, thoughts that you might have on that?
Jonathan, I'll let you deal with that one.
Why, thank you, Mr. Lasden. So commissioners, I think the short answer to that question is yes. There are a number of different interim baby steps that could be taken based on a priority list. and to be moving forward incrementally rather than move forward with a large project. That's certainly an option. I would say that we have not delved into the level of detail as to what an incremental approach would look like, to the extent that we have done the detail of the ultimate goal as contained in the PDD. But that's certainly an option for the commission to look at. Over the long run, incremental approach is a little bit more money, but from a cash flow standpoint and a risk management standpoint, it often is seen as a very responsible approach when you're dealing with some of the terminal issues that you have, like you have on Nantucket.
Thank you. And would we need a new contract or professionals? How would we go about that from having heard that we sort of hit a milestone in the existing contracting now?
We would direct McFarland Johnson to take on a new scope and fee based off of the commission's direction. They could give design options. They could give some alternatives to evaluate, but we would need to direct them to develop that. The more feedback we can provide to them, the more helpful of a document we get in return.
Ms. Planzer or Ms. Topham, you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to know more about the opportunity for to get funding for it. I mean, has that time passed, or there's still opportunity?
So if I may, Mr. Chair?
Please.
So yes, there is one more round of Bill ATP funding, which is what we were Airport Terminal and Tower Program. So there's one more round. The first 3 years, the application was due in October. This past year, they moved the application earlier to July. There is one more round for next year. However, all bets are up in the air because of the new administration and what their new strategies could be at the U.S. Department of Transportation. So, as I had said before, traditionally for the first 3 years, they wanted shovel-ready projects, which meant, bid docs prepared and ready to go. But Martha's Vineyard just were selected for a $15 million award, and they were at the place that we are now. They had just essentially finished their PDD and were successful in winning a $15 million award. But
That sounds nice.
it's very nice, except for Jonathan, who now has to do that. So it's hard to say what the federal funding options are through the ATP program. And as the chair has mentioned, and as you've been in on some meetings trying to figure out how to fund the runway and other projects, there are some major funding commitments that you have to make in the next couple of years.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So if we were to do a interim type of an approach, that still could be a fairly sizable project, especially talking about something like the GAC type system. Just, I have no idea on the real number, but let's just say we're talking like a 3 to 5 million, maybe dollar type of a number. I wouldn't be surprised. Would something like that then raise to a level of potentially a PFC eligible project?
Yes.
So there's
chance. PFCs and your PFCs are, I think you're paid out on the current round in the next year or two, you're done, right?
We'd submit a new application in about 15 months.
Yeah, that was one of my recollection was that.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying that I'm trying to drive that, I'm just putting options out there that, if we were to look at something, there's a potential revenue source that's essentially directly related to, the service that's provided. Like, we would be improving the terminal for the customer, primarily the experience there, I think, and then related to those charges, and then there's the environmental side of things for the.
I will remind the commission, PFCs are like AIP funding. It's based on eligibility percentages. So, if I think you remember that the terminal currently today was 59% eligible and the other 41% you carried on your own.
Yep.
And when we did the security upgrade, I think it was, 79% eligible. Now, in that particular case, the state provided you with significant funding, but anything with a terminal is always going to be some kind of a percentage
Yeah.
eligibility.
My question was, I recognize that and I appreciate you mentioning it. I'm thinking along just the lines, I wanted to verify, generally speaking,
Yep.
that a smaller improvement project might still qualify for something like that as a, I know that if you get too small, it's not worth getting into that whole PFC process. So, but my sense is that if we, especially we start talking about the tent, the GAC, the heating system related to the terminal, what else you guys maybe come up with, Jonathan, based on the studies that you and your team have done. I think we could look to you. From what I'm hearing, everyone's sort of in agreement that it would be, where might we get some bang for the buck and improvement for immediate need without going too far? What is the useful life that's left of the current tent, I guess, would be one of the questions as well. Is it done? Is it a year? I know that it's a function too of the severity of the weather through any particular summer season. Is there an improvement to that if it's going to be longer term? Some sort of more panelized modular construction that would allow for, Mr. Carver mentioned, you could potentially, climate control that, which I think is one of the major hurdles for summer out there. So is there some other option that you guys might be aware of that might work as a replacement for that? That was just another thought. The front parking lot, I know in the studies, I really don't want to see that good work lost if there was some improvements that could be made on that drop off and the struggles that I've watched for years, the staff during the summer having to manage. But I recognize if we were going to go closed loop, you don't want to rip apart the parking lot if you were going to be putting something else underneath it. That could be an animal in of itself, but at what point do we consider that does probably get more to wants than needs. So those are just some of my thoughts on what we might look at.
Yeah. I'm not interested really in pursuing this much further. I'd like to see us get the crew quarters done.
Yeah.
I'd like to see this noise barrier built, preferably without the solar. I'd like to accelerate that. And I'd like to see what our retained earnings are going to be consumed in the crew quarters. Just what we've got.
Oh, yeah.
Phase one on the border wall. That's the end of our crew quarters. After that, we're borrowing money.
This year.
Yeah. After that, we're borrowing money. I don't want to see us with $20 or $30 million worth of long-term debt. We've been down that. When I got on the commission, the town didn't like the way we were operating. They turned us down. They put a lot of worry into the airport staff with regard to anything we wanted to do. The answer was no. So I'd like to be solvent and take a deep breath on this. And see what, we've got some transition going here with our staff. I'd like to get us through all that before we start teeing up a $20 million, $30 million debt.
So do we keep our focus on just that geothermal piece of things, the filtering, or even is that even an option to, I guess I would look to you to really know for a recommendation on where is that line between wants and needs? And I don't, I'm not to put you on the spot, I don't have to answer that right now, but I think that would be helpful for us. If there are certain things that have been identified and say, Mr. McCready, that, you say, look, you guys, as a result of this pretty extensive amount of work that we've done, here's a couple things that, would really be cost effective and you should consider them. I'd be interested in knowing that.
Mhm. Things that would carry over as well, right?
Hopefully,
Hopefully.
some might not, like the tent, I think is the,
Well, no, not the temp, but I'm just
Right.
thinking like if like improvements, like if they came back and said, hey, you know what, if you did all this luggage stuff, you know, into the basement, if that was like one of those things that would carry over into the new part,
Mhm.
that would make a big difference. Maybe it wouldn't. I'm just throwing that out there.
So I can speak to it
Yeah,
very
please, yeah.
quickly and directly, and if I might at the end, Mr. Chair, I just want to recognize our OPM team if they have any
Yeah,
comments
please.
to add on the
Yep.
geothermal. But I would just refer to my manager recommendations slide and my minimum suggested alternative, because I still think that's the minimum suggested alternative. I think, you know, my recommendation to the commission is that whatever the geothermal system, I'll borrow a phrase from Mr. Laston, or heating system wants to be, we need to take that on because it's going to be a 3-year planning process from design to fix it. And this is something everyone has expressed a great deal of concern about. I don't know what that ultimate answer is, if it's a closed loop, an open loop with treatments, or a conventional system, but we can task our experts to develop that. Tent 3.0, again, not an engineer, but, you know, not so much from a capacity issue, but the steel structure for our tent. It's just beginning to show signs of age. It's been in the salty air for 4 or 5 years. By 3 years from now, I think we are looking at replacement. I'm not saying it has to be larger, but I'm saying we could probably design a better system and use for that. That just really gets us back to normal. It gets us back to an HVAC system that works and doesn't migrate a plume. It gets us back to accommodating the passenger demand that we had 3 years ago. And then the only improvement that I would recommend is a CUS, or a common use ticketing system. Under a common use system, it's an IT backbone. At one given time, JetBlue might occupy 3 counters. They slide down and occupy 4 counters as American and Delta spool up. There aren't pre-assigned positions. Everyone can move from one to the other. That's sort of an industry standpoint, or what small congested airports do to handle higher volumes of traffic without expanding. And Jonathan McCready is really in a better position to speak about his experience with that technology. But the reason I think that's your minimum and your minimum sort of actionable item, went back to my first slide. We have $17 million in borrowing authorization now. I go back to the capital committee soon enough, and we need to also decide, do we ask for another supplemental authorization? You know, from what I'm hearing now, the answer is the commission doesn't want to pursue a larger project and more funding. If the commission does, I need to go to Capcom and request more than that ability. Do I think we can accomplish these items for $17 million, these 3 items? I don't really know, but I'm hopeful. It's an existing amount of authorization that could then be cut down by some grant funding.
What 3 items are you referring to?
Building, whatever the building HVAC system is
Okay.
going to be, tent 3.0.
Yeah,
And common use ticketing and podium system.
sure.
So that would be an item to be scoped then by MJ presumably with the rest of the team as subs. Bring that back. And then we have that funding approved, authorized rather. Doesn't mean we have to spend it, take that same, but at least then we would, you know, I like that in that we've made an investment into the work that we've done. That the team has prepared, and I'd like to see us, you know, there's some needs here and we would be able to continue to work off of that. And tonight's kind of the first time we've heard that a treatment of the open loop might actually be feasible, whereas I think the understanding before was that the volumes might have been too high. So I'm really looking forward to perhaps hearing a little, and I'm encouraged. I really appreciate you having the experts here that, you know that the answer that, you know, that there's potential capacity within the open loop system for that future expansion. So that helps my decision making to say, well, sort of to the point of it wouldn't really be lost. In other words, we fix that now, no matter what happens, and we help to position future commissions for improving the terminal when these other projects have been done and are off the table. So,
With your permission.
Yeah, please.
Defer to our OPM, they can,
yeah, any
they have any
thoughts,
additional
please?
perspective.
Floor is
Background
yours,
noise.
if you had anything.
So just a couple of minor points that I would add in consideration. I think it sounds like a potentially cost benefit analysis between filtration versus a closed loop ultimately for the HVAC system. The couple of things that I'll add in is that there are utility-based incentives that are fairly high for ground source heat pump systems. The administration of those incentives is due to transfer the January 1st, 2025 to the electric opcos. So that's a little bit of a change where historically they were administered by the gas utilities, and that would render potentially no incentive opportunity for this project. So that's a big change that I think could have an impact on life cycle analysis. It remains to be seen whether or not there will be major impacts given the change of leadership for IRA programs, but there is currently a fairly extensive IRA program just to benefit geothermal heating and cooling systems. So if a new system was installed, there could be up to a 50% tax benefit that's allowed. And it sounds odd from a tax exempt entity standpoint, but some of the modifications that were brought in the 2022 revision to investment tax credit allowed for a direct payment of tax benefits. So there is a path with which the airport could potentially receive a pretty major buy down on that project's cost, again, pending any potential changes at the federal government leadership level. So just a couple of things as it relates to that closed loop and a potential life cycle analysis between closed loop versus maintenance of the open loop system. And then the obvious consideration would need to be longevity of the asset. There's a kind of twofold consideration there between available system capacity as compared to the how long the system has been deployed, how long the collective group thinks that system will be able to be serviceable as far as kind of service lifetime goes. There's different schools of thought, open versus closed loop systems on that front. And happy to discuss or answer any specific questions, but that's just a couple of high level points that jumped out to me.
Thank you for that, and I think as there's the next scope, if we're following the minimum suggested alternative, we want those factored in to the advice, to the recommendation that we're receiving in terms of if we're going to go through a treatment type of a system, we would want to do it for a system that then you expected only had a design life of too short of a term. And I don't know if that's related to the mechanicals that currently exist, or if it's a function of the injection wells, how long and how much they'll be able to continue to, be viable, or whatever it is that is the limiting factor there. I think we'd want to look at that.
Yeah, both a little bit. I would say there are factors related to both the wells and the building HVAC systems. I will also say that the tax benefit is the entirety of system. So from source of heating, cooling in the closed loop wells all the way through to the mechanical system. So if you do a replacement of building side systems, generally those are also able to receive that tax benefit as well.
Anybody else from the OPM team? All right, so it sounds, commissioners, are we in agreement to pursue the minimum suggested alternative as at least to get a scoping? It's not actually to do it, but it's to have MJ develop a scope for what their work, as I understand it, please tell me if I'm wrong, for a contract for them to then develop what that would look like. And that would be following the manager's recommendation. And under our existing authorization, where we go forward.
Any idea of the money on that?
Just a design contract, right, at this point?
Yeah,
Mr.
well, they'll
Lasman?
develop the scope for free.
Yeah.
If you want them to do the work, we'll have to pay them.
Yeah, let's go for that. Oh, Mr. Lasden, does that seem like something that, though I will agree with, to Mr. Buscarin's point, I understand you also have finite resources available to you with the, you know, your own team, and if you're prioritizing things, I hope we could, look towards, advancing that wall project so that we could be responsive to the community there.
Yep, we will get back to you in the next couple, by next week or the week after, on our discussion with National Grid, if that's if there's anything there. And then regarding the minimum suggested alternatives, I mean, you know, Noah and I and Jonathan can have a meeting with Noah in the next couple of days to sort of discuss the three alternatives. You know, we have to sort of understand what tent 3.0 means, and sort of move on from that. You know, the other two I think are pretty self-explanatory, but tent 3.0, we have to sort of finalize what that means.
I'll tell you what I thought about that. I was thinking, if possible, like a panelized, but like something that is, you know, not actually, you know, for season. And the comparison in my mind was sort of like the kids' Magna-Tiles kind of a thing that you put together, and then you take it apart for the winter, and then you store those, and you know, but it actually does have some, you know, R value to it, if you would, and some rigidity to withstand that wind. Now, I'm not trying to send you down. Maybe it is just an improved tent since the last time.
And
You know, well, again, if it's something that, you know, we could climate control, I think there would be a big improvement there.
So one of the challenges with the tent in and of itself is, while it's covered, the passenger experience, either from exhaust fumes and or aviation noise, are the sort of the biggest challenges that you have from a tent. So if you're looking to get something that improves passenger experience, you want to think about those two things. And that's what we'd want to think about when we go to the next step.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe we just can't, maybe it's not gonna.
And so I'm not saying we
I'm glad you
can't.
mentioned that. I was thinking climate control, but I guess it's probably more your.
It's like I said, it's fumes and noise. You know, you
I've been in the
you
tent a
can't
few
make a
times
cell
during the
phone call.
summertime.
What's
was
that?
fun,
I'm sorry.
you know. Yeah.
I guess it depends if you get stuck.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Can I
well,
ask
let's see
one
what that
quick
looks like.
question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Because I think Ms. Lane probably knows how much was the 15 million of the Martha's Vineyard project? What percentage?
What percent of their total estimated construction cost?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I want to say 40%, something.
source.
They were in the same sort of number that you were as far as their ultimate program.
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, that seal is the 20 million bucks.
Okay, I think we've got and thank you again to all. We really appreciate all the work of all the team members on this. One point, I don't want to belabor this, but Mr. Laz, you mentioned the meeting with National Grid, but I really think that if we could get any kind of initial solar production estimate, you know, that might end up driving that decision as much as the National Grid. Right.
Okay.
If we find out that based on the, you know, that if there's a solar consultant that you have that could, you know, bring in to look at what kind of production and that, you know, we know where it's going, we know the exposure, you know, the square footage of the wall.
Yep.
What might we be talking about in terms of output? I think that would be helpful. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody have anything further on the terminal optimization project?
No.
Okay, thank you all. We'll move on to Mr. Carberry, the rates and charges hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rates and charges hearing, we are proposing that the commission, I believe we need a vote for the commission to hold a hearing, is that correct?
I think so.
We would like to hold our annual rates and charges hearing on January 14th, 2025. We follow our normal process. Staff would make sort of a draft presentation to you in the December meeting. You'd have an opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed rate structure changes. And then we will hold the actual public hearing in the January meeting. Good. So we would request your votes, open the public hearing then.
Such a motion. Is there such a motion for rates and charges on the 14th? Been made and seconded. Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
I'm assuming there was no further discussion on that.
No.
And Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Finance.
Okay, Maria and I have reviewed the first quarter of fiscal year 25, which is from July through September. I do want to spend some time on it because the first quarter, July, August, and September is very predictive of our remainder of the fiscal year's financial performance. Typically represents 75% of our annual revenue. I want to present it because it's full of good news and have Maria see how I present
Yeah.
the report, but I have told her to speak up if I misstate anything. You know, she doesn't have to worry about saving face for me. Just make sure that the commission is aware of those items. So from the financial, I'm thinking going. So first quarter revenue is up 7% or just over 1 million, mostly on the strength of our fuel sales. There are some differences quarter over quarter due to the status of the fuel revolver. I'll discuss the fuel revolver in later slides, later pages. But really the difference is whether we're holding that fuel revenue in our fuel revolver or our operating accounts. Fee income and FBO revenue are down. This is being driven by higher load factors in the commercial market and the airport receiving less in ramp and landing fees, as well as slightly fewer business jet operations over that period. However, this revenue reduction exists because we're moving the same number of people on fewer aircraft operations. So while we're seeing a little bit less revenue, it's an operational and sustainability positive for us. I'm not trying to sound difficult about it, but we know our business very well. What we lose in fee revenue, which is $230,000, we more than make up for in fuel revenue, which is up $1 million. So we manage that accordingly. Most importantly, our total revenue ended the quarter at 80% of our annual operating budget, which will hold us well through our 2 lean quarters. And then we come out the other side, hopefully with a strong close to quarter 4 and the year in another positive position. For our expenses summary, the story with expenses is that they're actually down 1% from the previous year in direct comparisons. The Barnstable County retirement withdrawal happened to hit in quarter 1 of this year. It hit in quarter 2 of last year. So it sort of understates our performance. If you pull this out, we're actually down 1% instead of up 7% as we reflect. What I believe the driver for this is, despite our salary expenses being up 161,000, we have filled positions that have been vacant for a while. Our major expense categories, such as operations and maintenance, are down 161,000. Repairs and maintenance are down 36,000. So we're paying more in staffing, but on the balance, we're getting a lot more out of staffing than we have on outsourcing contracts. We're currently at 39% of our annual budgeted expenses. Let's go to the income statements. That's doing that. So, our income statement shows this summary. Really, the only item I wanted to point out here is an increase in net earnings over this point in the previous year. The surplus shows is significantly greater than last year, but it's skewed by the difference in our fuel revolver. It'll likely be closer to $5 million in surplus once we adjust for raising the revolver cap. It should still be ahead of last year. fuel revolver slide. So I think the top line number is the most important one that I wanted to relate from the fuel revolver. You know, total sales, gross profit are important too. They're both tracking ahead of last year. And this is really based on what I think was an exceptional operational win between the airport, our fuel distributor, Preston and his operations staff to keep our product on hand this year. Exactly. In fiscal year 24, we'd also set the fuel revolver low at this time in the year. We later would increase the fuel revolver in quarter 3 or quarter 4. To the 8.8 million reflected here. Again, Maria's already done the work on the fiscal year 25 fuel revolver increase. We think we'll raise it to 8.6 million at the beginning of the summer. We want to allow for enough time for the year to elapse, but where we still have time in the fiscal year to raise it. And so again, you know, that will reduce the profit that we apply to the operating budget from the 4.7 million currently reflected on the bottom line. That would reduce it to 2.1 million. That's still, you know, what we require for our operational transfer and ahead of last year. Let's go to the revenue detail. Okay. Really quickly, 2 lines I wanted to point out is that our annual rental income continues to increase on the strength of new and resetting leases. And then managing our interest-bearing accounts has been an added revenue line in this current rate environment. Go to the expense detail. Really quickly, I just want to point out, this is where the Barnstable County retirement is hitting, 4th line down. It hit in this quarter instead of the 2nd quarter. And then all the way to the last page, the debt sheet. Thank you. So based on Maria's suggestion, I think it's a good one. I think we'll keep adding it to the fiscal year reports. We've added a snapshot of our debt schedule. The columns from left to right are the improvement name, the debt issue date, and then the total principal for the top graph, interest on the bottom graph, outstanding in the fiscal year of debt retirement. I've had some individual conversations with commissioners. I think it's good to sum that up now. But for general obligation bond debt, we can't pay it off early due to the nature of the municipal guarantee that's made on the bond issuance. However, a municipal entity can set up a formal stabilization or sinking fund to pay off bond debt. How that would work is the airport could transfer money into the fund and then direct payments from it. We even do this informally. We could just kind of keep track of it in our head, how much we have in retained earnings and how much we keep on the books year to year to offset, you know, the debt that we might want to pay off or pay off on paper. I don't have any action for you on this. It's just an item to consider as we look at long-term debt management, to keep track of it. There are fun ways that we can address this in the future, and those would be future conversations. So that's a quick review of our first quarter fiscal report. I do think it's very good. You know, credit to staff and the operation, but it really does. I really believe it starts with managing our fuel, you know, day to day, fuel into the plane, trucks coming over on the boat. Any questions?
No.
This slide is really helpful. Thank you very much for putting this together. I haven't seen it quite in this format before, as someone who's read these reports for a while, and it really highlights the fiscal management of the past, you know, few years as well, where it shows how we weren't taking things long-term, bonding, you know, debt because of this reason, where you're stuck with it for so long, so that if you can pay under the, you know, pay it, you don't have that pay early option, if you will. So and most of these you could see are, I don't think there's stuff that we've taken long-term in quite a number of years, and this just really shows that most of these were refis of stuff that had been done before. So it's good, but this is helpful to sort of know, I think, as we're especially piggybacking on the earlier discussion. Because that, if we were to go in that project, that would hit this in a big way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to our CIP, or our capital improvement plan. I have the updated CIP, this follows from our meeting, and then completion of comment submission from FAA and DOT. I'm not walking through it all line by line, but I did want to highlight the following. For calendar year 2000, or federal fiscal year 2025, it's finalized, and you'll see those projects tracked in my manager's report going forward. These are the NEPA updates, the ramp lighting, which I'll discuss in a few sections here. 624 centerline work, airfield remarking, townhouse, and ongoing PFAS work. 2026 shows commuter apron reconstruction, but we may very well push that project back depending on the pavement condition inventory. There's a minimum pavement condition inventory value that the pavement needs to have deteriorated down to before it's eligible for funding by the FAA. Our new surveys will take place in December. If our PCI numbers are still too high, which isn't an unwelcome development, we'll just push that project out accordingly. And fiscal year 2026, we are showing the $17 million. You can scroll me down a little bit.
The terminal improvements in the blue.
There we go. No, that's the program definition report. Scroll down to 2026.
Yeah, there you
There
go.
we go. We're holding still 17.5 million. That's our current borrowing authorization for term of work. And then in 2028, we're showing runway 624 reconstruction. And this is in current dollar values for the current scope of work, just under $100 million. So that's a large project. Again, I didn't want to go through it line by line, but I wanted you to have a copy of it.
And how's that funded? Is that all federal funding or what? $100 million for the runway.
Runways are funded by the FAA's AIP program at 90% for our size airport.
So we still came up with 10 million.
It presents an issue for our region because they only receive 40 million for the entire region in discretionary funding. So we're having conversations with the region, our consultant group in Washington, about how as a team we can accommodate that without occupying all of the region's funding for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Wow. Is it, not that you would know this, but maybe you would, does the increased larger aircraft, the JetBlue aircraft, are they deteriorating the runway at the accelerated rate?
So, it's beyond my capacity to say that they
That's
are,
fine,
but the
I'm just
textbook
curious.
answer is yes.
Yeah.
Heavier aircraft deteriorate.
I didn't know if you had the evidence of it, that's all.
Yeah, that's
So I'm moving on to the capital project updates.
yes, please.
So I'm in the process of meeting with the capital committee based on the feedback that I've heard here about the terminal. I am going to pull any future presentation of supplemental terminal funding. The main item that I'm working with on the capital committee is the townhouse project. They've asked for more information from the airport. A lot of this relates to 2 items. I've tried to make this clear previously and we'll do it again, but the first is airport land and airport sort of housing opportunity is really only available for airport employees, those employees who provide a aeronautical purpose for the airport. The way I explain it is if we build a townhouse, a side-by-side set of units, and we can only fill 1 unit, we certainly can offer the other unit to police or fire if it's unoccupied, because those 2 agencies specifically have a identified role to support aeronautical operations in our improvement plan. But we can't build what I'd call, a barracks for police or a barracks for fire. As much as I like them, we can't do that under grant assurances. So we're going to get some help to provide that explanation to Capcom in a different format. The other issue I've been dealing with, and I feel it's understandable, is not everyone deals with municipal projects day in and day out and understands that, municipal project has to be designed, there are construction administration services. We need an OPM contract. Our prices as a municipal entity have to include prevailing wage, all of these requirements that escalate the price. So I'm creating a table that shows our projects, and I've done research to compare our dorm project or proposed townhouse project to other projects that are going on in the town. First of all, there aren't a lot of other projects going on in the town. I think the commission should feel great at the rate that they've advanced airport employee projects. But these projects also compare very favorably to a couple other projects that are in concept or under construction now. And I'll be providing the results of my research and the grant assurances to the capital committee. Any questions on that before I move?
No.
I'll just add, I mean, I was gonna say that commissioner comment, but I attended that Capcom meeting with the manager a few days ago, and so we've had some discussions, and we'll work to answer some of their questions. There's a lot of them are repetitive to the questions that were asked and answered related to the dorm, but they've got some new members. It's kind of with the change, and so we just need to, I think, help to explain that. And it's not only that we can't build, one of them is, could they use airport land to build on, and why working, getting them the answer to
Why not? Yeah.
understand why that's just not
Yeah.
An option. So I think that we'll continue to, we had to sort of stop, say, look, we'll get back to you.
Right.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Moving into my manager's report on the AIP or similarly funded project standpoint. For our master plan, the final TAC meeting needs to be scheduled, as well as the final open house. My direction, the consultant, is to have that final open house in the same format as the original, which is poster boards, people meeting, greeting the public, walking through those poster boards sort of one-on-one in the terminal. We'll have it during dinner time in the evening, and we'll provide food or appetizers from Crossroads as we did in the past. Geometry DBE update, no update on the geometry side. We do have our new disadvantaged business enterprise plan approved. It is a 3.58% race neutral guideline. No update on the ARF truck or continued environmental monitoring. On our PFAS mitigation grant and the use of the home rule petition, the advertising deadline passed without it being petitioned to annual town meeting. So that can move forward, and we'll finalize the scope with the FAA and then get to work. On our MEPA, NEPA updates, those are the acronyms for federal and state environmental permitting. We have held a spot, and it's on our CIP, to direct future permitting updates that can be anticipated from the master plan. We had a meeting today with the FAA and Mass DOT. That update is not finalized, but a short list of items that we brought to them to discuss includes categorical exclusions for any terminal, hard stand, or apron work. And that's mostly going to be driven by the runway 624 reconstruction, work associated with taxiway Charlie reconfiguration at the connection into runway 33, potential hangar removal and relocation. And I made our position that master plan group, we're still interested in discussing whatever the noise abatement work is that might come out of that process. So continue sharing this. For the ramp lighting, I'll have Billy bring up our design figure. We held an initial scoping meeting with the FAA. Purpose of the meeting was to confirm the eligibility of lights for replacement. We have 17 lights. One of them lights the rental car overflow area, and 2 light both the ramp and the auto parking. The ramp would be eligible, the auto parking would not, so those have to be prorated, but it's a small number out of the overall 17 lights. Parking lot. We're going to do them all at once for efficiency, even if at the end of the day we pay a little bit more out of pocket. We've held a staff-oriented meeting also to discuss the design features and processes important to the airport. So the height, the backlighting, the dimming ability, ease of control, sort of scaling the lumens from the lights in front of the FBO. That should probably be brighter than the ones all the way down at Juliet. So I can't tell you exactly what these lights are going to look like, but those are important steps for design. And we'll probably use a future portion of a airport commission meeting to have a public workshop related to that. The runway 624 center line. We received bids. We are going to need another 300,000 in funding. And we'll need to push this work to the spring. It's still eligible work. We're just directing a grant application to the FAA for that additional amount. No update on the airfield marking project. Hangar developments, we're working on lease language for approval for Hagedorn Hangar 10. Fence relocation in the bunker area, I mentioned that earlier, that should begin next week. Fence relocation on the south shore, I discussed previously, and I'll have subsequent updates here. And then the refueling pad wall repair, we've issued a notice of award to track builders. I'll follow up with Mr. Cox, and we'll move to get the contract to the commission. For my bid status update, we're working to reissue the lease or reissue the RFP to lease 33 bunker. We're working on the request for expressions of interest for the flat top roof building. And then I have a list of items here, flight procedures, RFP, our airline leases we'll work on over the winter to reissue over the summer. And contract document with 1200 Aero, which is our future ramp operational software. But please bear with us, so we're getting to the airline lease season. That's ends up occupying a lot of time. We'll work on those others as we can. For an operations update, preparations for the president over Thanksgiving are underway. We look forward to being able to accommodate multiple C-17s on the ground now with our new ramp extension. For the fuel farm, Preston has been working with mass tanks and ops staff to drain and shift fuel loads so they can perform fall maintenance, including some much needed work to epoxy coat the inside, do some troubleshooting. I think they're going to come back and do the emissions vapor recovery.
Stage 1 vapor testing.
Stage 1 vapor testing. Sculpture Park, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's already occurred, but the gallery is going to pick up one of their statues in the park. So if there are questions, that's why they're moving some of their items around. FBO utility marking, if you've been by the FBO, it looks like a modern art installation right now. There's a lot of flagging out, ground marking paints. All I have to say is the person who's doing the utility markup for the future electric aircraft charger did one heck of a job, but we're not about to, rip up that area. FAA Tech Ops is working on a project to upgrade the runway 15 reels. They'll be pulling power from the T hangar. And they'll also tie that project into the pilot control lighting circuit. This is their project. It's an important safety project, so we're supporting them with access and coordination. FAA project, we're assisting them. And I'll update as they reach their milestones. Do you all still want to hear about statistics?
No.
Should I wait that?
No, we're good.
We've read them.
Cape Air is doing really well. I am seeing.
That's good.
My personnel report, Val Garcia has joined the airport, or I'd say she is transitioning her role in the airport. She's been a high-performing seasonal worker for us and is our new terminal manager. She'll wrap up in operations and start in her maintenance. Our new maintenance 1 position is filled by Mr. Roberto Campos. He will start on the 25th. And we held a heck of a going away party for Deb Crooks on Friday. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions on any of the items on the report? Is there any public comment? The items not on the agenda. We didn't have on the agenda commissioner comment. I should have maybe caught that. We usually do. Is there any commissioner comment for future agenda items? Any other thing? I guess this would have been a question to Mr. Carberry. Do we have any sense of when the final TAC meeting might occur? Is that after the new year for the master plan?
I had thought it's still scheduled for December, but we'll have to look at
Okay.
holiday.
Yeah, just curious.
Availability.
Okay. And I just wanted to provide the commission and the public an update on the manager search. The ad is, the posting is currently active, and that closes in 5 days on the 17th. And ADK is gonna work on I think synthesizing through, what they receive, and then we'll bring things back to us. Their rough timeline, right around our next meeting, perhaps will be a client deliverable of some executive summaries from them, finding out sort of who's made their cut to then take it to the next part of the process. We're gonna work with council between now and then to figure out how that next step will go. And then they've laid out a potential dates for final interviews for the first week of the year, so the 6th, something like that. See, things might shift around a little bit, but that's how that's going. I haven't heard anything. I don't know, other than there's been, I think, some interest, but I don't have other information, nor have I really tried. I figured let the process just run its course until it closes, and then we'll find out what's going on.
Good.
So that was all I had. And anybody else, Ms. Plans or Ms. Topham? Hearing none, we would entertain a motion to go into executive session per general law, chapter 38, section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda. Clause 3, discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh. Clause 3, discuss strategy with respect to pursuing legal claims against the manufacturer of PFAS. Both the chair has determined an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the airport commission, not to return to open session. Is there such a motion?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Topham, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Scarron?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you, Preston.
It was a very nice party for